Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready for the Wot Supp podcast. With your host, Stu OG Industry Shannon and Will Warren Davey, new school formulator extraordinaire. We're talking all things supplements with insiders, athletes, experts, and more. So sit back, relax, and prepare to find out what's up.
Hi guys, Will here. Today we're a bit of a change of pace. We're doing a solo cast for the Wot Supp podcast. This is episode 42. We've now cracked out some significant amount of episodes on this platform, which is unreal, and it is doing exactly what we intended to when Stu and I and Matt Highgate as well founded this podcast about a year and a half ago now. It's putting out education around the supplement industry, products therein, trends, manufacturing, business, and all areas. So what I want to crack into today, we unfortunately don't have my co-host Stu Shannon, and unfortunately he wishes he could be on because this topic is absolutely awesome. And I hope to have a part two, probably with him on around it because it is so comprehensive. Now, what I want to do is follow that trend we had in the last few episodes around doing deep dives in particular supplement areas. Last week we did testosterone boosters and did a deep dive on testosterone boosters, what to look for, what not to look for, trends in the past, and what ingredients really do work for us, and what are some of the symptom pictures, and it's really cool stuff there. So this week, what I want to do, as a bit of change of pace, is fat burners in the same theme. Go through a deep dive on fat burners, explain some common ingredients you'll see regularly, how they work, what to look for, and if you're someone who's using a fat burning supplement now as well, what to expect, I suppose. So this could be a really good episode for people who are new to fat burners, possibly people looking to purchase a fat burner, who's a bit uncertain, and maybe some of those who want to know a little bit more about each of the ingredients, how they work, and sort of see what I guess we can pull from that. So. Cracking in, I suppose we'll go with an overview first on what fat burners are designed to do, how they're actually meant to help, because I think there's a bit of misnomer around them. There's a bit of fitness industry myths around fat burners. People think they're a magic pill you can take and instantly just shed bulk weight without having to diet or exercise. And I think the great thing in these episodes is always put a bit of a disclaimer in that obviously supplements are made to be just that. They're a supplement to a healthy diet, to an exercise regimen. They are meant to be alongside an active lifestyle, not just taken solo. But in the absence of, I suppose, once all that's been said, let's dive into how they work. So I suppose the idea behind them is to increase a few things. One key goal is to increase your caloric expenditure. They're meant to make you burn more calories. So when we look at fat loss as a whole, what are we looking at? We're looking for burning more calories. So we're having to expend more calories than we bring in. We're trying to burn more than we consume. So that's the goal behind fat loss. Create what we call a calorie deficit. Now that's where we have, and assisting in that goal of having a calorie deficit is burning more calories. And that's where fat burners were designed to help. And I suppose the way they do that primarily is through a few pathways. One is thermogenics. We've heard thermogenics used, as a word a few times in the fat burner market. All they're meaning there is something that will stimulate your central nervous system, usually through the use of a stimulant-based product. Things like in this category sort of include synephrines, caffeine. What these things do is they stimulate your central nervous system to run faster. They increase adrenaline, they increase norepinephrine, they increase cortisol, all these sort of hormones and neurotransmitters that gear our body up for performance and also basically upregulate metabolism as well, burn more calories too. I suppose this is one very, very common area. You've seen a lot of fat burners, we see a mix of, I suppose, on the lower end, stimulant-wise in the thermogenic market, we see them as low as 100 milligrams per scoop. My personal one, I'm more of a fan of lower stimulant fat burners personally when I formulate, but they also go right up to the top end as well with 200-300 plus milligrams of stimulant. And the idea is that high stimulant load there is stimulating that CNS, getting our body ramped up, burning more calories, as we go about the day. So that's one way that fat burners do help, is increasing that calorie burn, increasing that thermogenic nature, stimulating that calorie burn through those stimulants like synephrine, caffeines. In the past, your himbines, ephedras, these things, ephedrine, these things are really, really effective as well. But they're put in this sort of category of thermogenics. Now, the other way they drive fat loss can also be things around the appetite support as well. Obviously, when customers are dieting, if you're someone who's listening now who's looking for a fat burner and you're thinking, how do I actually help with, how can I help with these cravings I'm having? How can I keep my appetite under control while I'm dieting? There's two main ways that fat burners can help here as well. So we've covered the thermogenics, next part being appetite support. The two main pathways. One, stimulants. So a big part of, I suppose, the another plus of thermogenics being stimulant-based. Stimulants, like we said, increase adrenaline, increase cortisol, increase norepinephrine. again, these are our flight or fight mechanisms. These are our body's, I suppose, punch and run state that it likes to be in. So in this state, typically our body also shuts off blood flow to the digestive system, shuts off blood supply to the gut, and pushes it into our working muscles to help basically punch and run, right? So if if we've got these heavy stimulants floating around for our thermogenic fat burner, that's going to stimulate, the innervation of our working muscle, get the blood away from the gut, and shut off digestion. So that will in itself suppress appetite because your hunger signals are being muted. Your digestive system is basically put on pause because I guess in flight or fight situations, evolutionarily, we wouldn't have sat down and had a meal whilst we're running away from a tiger. Wouldn't have happened, yeah? So in this particular scenario, that's one main pathway fat burners can help to suppress appetite. Now, the other way it can do it is through managing blood sugar. Now, a lot of people's issues with appetite can come from fluctuating blood sugar levels. And I suppose this comes more and more so. We see this now where we have insulin resistance and following metabolic issues like type 2 diabetes, becoming obscenely trending. We're seeing it increase more than 20-30% in the last decade, which is massive. They're US figures, but here it's following the same trend. We're seeing basically massive upward line. And the reason for this is, I suppose, people we're quite sedentary now. People got a lot of, we've got a lot of sedentary jobs. A lot of automation has meant we don't have to do as physical work as we used to. But people are still consuming a lot of high carbohydrates in their diets as well. And that might look like a standard American diet, for example. It might look like, a bagel. It might look like cereal or toast. For breakfast, something sugary, maybe pastries. And then the next thing, at lunch, we might have a wrap or a roll or a sandwich or a bagel, or these carbohydrate based. Dinner, pastas, rices, starchy vegetables, again, carbohydrates. We're basically spiking our blood sugar throughout the day regularly. And what this does, this causes a peak in insulin as well. Insulin is our body's transporter. It gets that blood sugar, carries it into the muscle, and stores it ideally for fuel. Problem is, as we're having more and more carbohydrates throughout the day, we're constantly stimulating this insulin release, and we're constantly saying to our body, we need to store. Now, over time, it starts pushing out more and more insulin because it goes, I've got more and more to store, more and more blood sugar, it actually becomes insulin resistant to a point where, unfortunately, your muscles will take a certain amount of stored sugars and it puts it in the form of glycogen, but your fat cells won't. Your fat cells don't become insulin resistant, but your muscle cells do, which is really, really crappy. So what that means is that your body will actually store body fat preferentially when it has elevated insulin regularly. Now, again, this is as a disclaimer, all things being equal, this is to do with your calorie balance as well. If you're eating more calories than you burn, yes, you store fat. If you're in a calorie deficit, these things change a little bit. Just for listeners at home, if you're looking at the ins and outs of appetite and why you might have sugar cravings and so on, what we're explaining here is that insulin, which is the main transporter for blood sugar, having a high carbohydrate diet causes these spikes in insulin resistance, our body putting out more and more insulin. Now, what this does then is causes a reactive low in blood sugar. So we eat a high carbohydrate meal, and those looking at the YouTube channel, I'll sort of try and explain this a little bit with a bit of a diagram here. If we have our high carbohydrate meal, that's going to peak blood sugar. Insulin will then be secreted to bring it down and partition it. And then we have this reactive low in blood sugar. And this low period here, when we have low blood sugar, that's when our body is sending signals saying, oh, look, our blood sugar is low. We need energy. We need glucose. Get us more sugar. That's where a lot of our sugar cravings come from, is those reactive highs and lows, that yo-yoing of your blood sugar going high when we're eating a high carbohydrate meal, insulin being pumped out, and due to resistance, probably a lot of insulin being pumped out, trying to store all that and stripping it all out of our blood. Then we have these low periods of blood sugar, and that low blood sugar is really influencing it in a bad way too. That low blood sugar is what's causing that craving for something sweet and sugary because it thinks we're actually in very low blood sugar state. So I guess what we can do with fat burners and to circle all that sort of comprehensive look at what's happening with that appetite, there are also a lot of ingredients in fat burners that help to manage blood sugar stability, and things which are all things that help with that, I suppose, that insulin management, that blood sugar management. Because if we can take that yo-yoing peaks and troughs out of our blood sugar, the highs and lows, and make our insulin work better, our transporters actually work better, we don't have that issue with the appetite. So I guess ingredients to look for in this space are things like banana leaf extract, cinnamon bark, berberine. There's some really cool ingredients that very much help. Chromium is a really popular one as well. Chromium is a mineral. Magnesium too. Chromium is a mineral that actually is actually involved in insulin signaling. So where insulin binds and actually carries and transports sugar into a cell, very, very crucial. So Ingredients in this space that helps manage blood sugar, also manage appetite. So brief overview thus far. Thermogenics, stimulant-based, stimulate your central nervous system, increase calorie burn. Stage 2, appetite support. Can either be stimulant-based, shutting off that digestive blood flow, ceasing, sort of hunger signaling, or part 2, managing blood sugar, stabilizing blood sugar as well. They look like your cinnamons, your Banabars, your chromiums, your magnesiums. All these things are very handy too. Now, the other part they can help with, I suppose, is trying to increase metabolic activity. This is sort of under the thermogenic category, but not so much, because I suppose what they're trying to do is increase caloric expenditure, which happens under the thermogenic sort of umbrella. But where we'll deep dive a little bit now is looking at what ingredients do that and how. So the ways of increasing caloric expenditure can be your thermogenic pathway, literally just ramping and stimulants, saying the body go faster. But the other really more genuine way, I suppose, the way that I like to look at fat burners and fat loss in general, is ingredients that help to increase basal metabolic rate and metabolic activity. So what does that look like? That looks like things that direct your thyroid function. So what's your thyroid? What's that mean? What does it mean by increasing thyroid function? Well, your thyroid is your body's thermostat, right? So it increases it dictates the rate that you burn calories, the rates that cells function. Literally, there's a receptor for your thyroid in every cell in your body. It's one of the only hormones that has that. Every single cell in your body, hair, skin, nail cells, DNA, everything has cells with receptors for a thyroid hormone. Now, your thyroid basically tells every cell how fast or slow to run. It's not just your metabolism, although it does dictate that by default, but we're not just talking about as simple as how many calories do you burn, how much food can you eat. The thyroid's super crucial for a host of other functions as well: cellular repair, cellular turnover, how fast hair grows, your nails grow, skin grows. It can be responsible for fluid retention, can be responsible for appetite regulation, responsible for other hormones like estrogen and testosterone being optimal. It can be responsible for cortisol. All these things. The thyroid is the most receptive, I suppose, organ in your body, and it's super, super crucial, right? But it's also what sets your basal metabolic rate. So if you've ever gotten a body scan or ever heard the term BMR or ever heard a look at, I suppose, hearing about this term, what it dictates is what calories your body needs just to exist, just to be in bed, just for your organs to function, your brain to be turned on, everything like that to actually work, right? So this is typically a lower number than you might expect. For example, I think mine was about 1,800, being a 110 kilo male. But what we don't want to confuse this with then is our total daily energy expenditure, or our TDEE. But essentially, our thyroid dictates our basal metabolic rate. That's the rate at which we burn calories at rest, given all else things are equal. Now, a lot of our classic sort of, I suppose, exercise programs and things we've looked at in the past are all geared towards increasing caloric expenditure in the gym, or whilst we're running, while we're going for sprints, while we're doing cardio. These things are great, but that's only 1 hour of the day. Your basal metabolic rate is the rest of the day, the other 23 hours. And look, even high-level athletes, maybe 30% of their calorie burn for their entire day is exercise, maybe, if they're really going hard, right? The vast majority of people, 70 to 85% of their daily calorie burn is actually from their basal metabolic rate. It's actually what their body needs to keep the lights on, not so much the exercise itself. But everyone's focusing on getting more calories out of that small amount of exercise. Everyone's really hammering, like, taking the thermogenics, going for a run, going for a jog, trying to get that calorie burn higher in that little window. We're looking at the smallest part of the pie, though. If you could take a supplement that was going to increase fat loss, logically, you'd want to look at something that's burning, that's influencing the other 70 or 80%, not the little piece of the pie. And that's where I suppose ingredients are designed that drive thyroid function are useful, because they're directly modulating the thyroid to either increase thyroid hormone output, to increase the rate at which it runs. And the idea there is to an optimal thyroid will mean optimal thyroid function will mean optimal basal metabolic rate, which means optimal calorie burn all day, right? Now, ingredients that do this really well. Coleus vauxhallia is my favorite. It's an absolutely awesome ingredient. It also has some really powerful effects on modulating cyclic AMP. So adenosine monophosphate. Now, cyclic AMP is where it's the nice thing with Coleus is it will help you both up and downstream. By that I mean, it will at doses between 250 milligrams twice per day is a pretty good place to be for a 10% extract. So when you're looking at your next fat burning label, have a look on there for Coleus vauxhallia, standardized to forskolin. Now, forskolin is the active ingredient. And it's a really, really great one to look for in your fat burner, because it can help to really directly stimulate that thyroid activity upstream. So that's when I say up and down. Upstream is it can stimulate signaling to the thyroid So TSH, thyroid signaling hormone, which goes from the brain down to the thyroid saying run faster. So it stimulates that. But it also stimulates at a cellular level, cyclic AMP, which is basically metabolic rate your metabolic activity at a cellular level as well. So even if there is some underlying metabolic issues where it can't sort of influence metabolic activity upstream of the thyroid, it will increase cellular activity at a cellular level anyway. So really, really great. This is also an awesome ingredient if you've been yo-yo dieting, chronically dieting, just been in a calorie deficit long term. It's a really good ingredient to have around because it can very strongly and very quickly stimulate metabolic rate to return to baseline, and it's quite quick acting. So it's a really, really cool herb. Pardon me, that floating around in your arsenal. So I recommend that for a part of your, I suppose, fat loss regimen. I think it's a really important one to include. I have it in all my fat burners personally for that reason, because it's, even if there is metabolic issues, it will help to increase metabolic rate. So other things that will help increase thyroid function or optimize it. Olive leaf extract, standardized for all your open. That is a really cool one that has shown in studies, particularly in rodents and humans as well, to increase free T3, optimized conversion from T4 to T3 as well. So when I'm saying T4 and T3, they're thyroid hormones as well, right? They're thyroid. Basically T4 is a tyrosine molecule with 4 iodine molecules bound to it. So T tyrosine, 4 iodine molecules. These go, so basically these thyroid hormones are built from iodine, built from tyrosine. So we've got olive leaf extract, which directly influences this thyroid hormone optimization, which is also mega important to get that basal metabolic rate optimal, to get that calorie burn high. That then leads beautifully into my other favorite categories, is using zinc, selenium, and iodine. These 3 nutrients are massively important, and I think in every fat burner they should probably be featured. There are some laws in Australia around it, unfortunately, with a caffeinated beverage containing these nutrients. So, like for example, when I make fat burners now, I had to actually remove them previously. Used to have them in there. Now I actually put it in my, I suppose, other categories of products to help customers still hit that. But in a caffeinated beverage, it's a bit tricky these days. So, but in general, zinc, selenium, and iodine all are very crucial cofactors for production. So is tyrosine as well. Tyrosine is an amino acid that can be used in a host of different ways. It can boost dopamine, being a precursor for L-DOPA. It can help with, I suppose, actually the building blocks of the thyroid hormone as well. So your thyroid loves tyrosine. So it's really, really useful amino acid. And look, I think the presence of tyrosine in these formulas alongside a zinc, selenium, iodine combination is unreal for thyroid hormone. Because what it does, you've got your Thermogenics, you've got your choline fulxoles, you've got your olive leaf extracts, all these things that are driving metabolic rate. But if you haven't got the nutrients there that your thyroid needs to physically build that hormone, I said before, T4, your parent thyroid hormone is literally 4 iodine molecules and a tyrosine molecule bound together, right? If you don't have an adequate iodine, if you don't have adequate tyrosine, you can't physically synthesize the hormone. You can't build the hormone. You haven't got cofactors. So, and selenium's a super crucial one as well as a cofactor, and so is zinc. So if we haven't got those key nutrients, and look, in Australia, we've got very old weathered soils. We don't have a high iodine content in our fruits and veg that are grown here. Unless you're eating a lot of seaweed and a lot of seafood, I suppose, there's really not a great deal of iodine floating around. They have iodized sea salt and iodized salt. It was a bit of a campaign the government did back in the 70s, but unfortunately they're including tiny amounts of iodine. Ideally, you'd want probably 150 micrograms per day of a good quality iodine supplement. You can get this from kelp, from bladderwhack. You can get a good supplements for it, or just straight up iodine. Usually it's just as potassium iodine in your supplement, but really, really great thing to have. So if your fat burner has iodine on the label, has tyrosine or tyrosine, has zinc and selenium, you're in a great place. Those are going to provide the nutrients alongside all things driving function as well. So really, really great thing to throw in there. And look, very, very synergistic. Even if you're using a fat burner right now that doesn't have those nutrients, really good idea to go find products that do, because they will help you massively. You're putting the foot on the pedal with the Thermogenics, but if you haven't got any gas in the tank, it's going to be a bad time, right? So we can't be stimulated to run faster, but have no resources to run faster. So you need to have some actual things there. So I guess your choline fulxoles, olive leaf extracts, tyrosine, iodine, zinc, selenium. These are really great supplements to throw in there that will help thyroid function. Yerba mate is my final one. Yerba mate is a South American tea. And what it does is it actually helps to, again, stimulate TSH. It drastically improves insulin sensitivity as well. So you could have put it back under the appetite management category. It is a really, really great antimicrobial, being very high in polyphenols. And polyphenols are a really up and coming sort of a category of supplement that I think will be really popular in the near future. And I think these are things like fruit peels, stems, leaves. all the bits of fruit and veg that I suppose we traditionally don't like in the Western diet. These sort of compounds like yerba mate, which is a tea, the leaves are very, very high in polyphenols as well. And these polyphenols have a really potent modbiotic effect, they call them. So what they do is it modulates your microbiome to have more of the favorable good bacteria, Bacteroidetes versus the Firmicutes or Firmicutes, however you want to say it. So it'll actually help to modulate gut as well. We see this as well with some other common polyphenol compounds like your grapeseed extracts, your pomegranate peel extracts. This is one that I used recently with pomegranate peel and metabolized when I made it. And the idea was that being quite high in polyphenols will modulate good, favorable microbiome and also increase basal caloric expenditure as well, showing some really good studies of polyphenols and basal metabolic rate. Also decreasing risks of heart disease, decreasing blood pressure. Really, really great all-around health markers improve when you have a high polyphenol diet. And a lot of compounds I spoke about today are actually quite high in polyphenols, coincidentally. Cinnamon barks, yerba mates, you've got your pomegranate peels in there as well. You've got a really cool, a lot of your fruits that are really known to be great for you are very high in polyphenols as well, blueberries and so on. So I guess that's another category that I think you'll see coming out more and more in fat burners in future. So they're probably the three broad categories that I see are very, very useful in a fat burning supplement. Thermogenics, appetite support, basal metabolic rate, or metabolic sort of, the drivers of metabolic rate are the three sort of broad categories we put in the fat burner market. Now, as an extra bit of fun as well, that's worth going into, quite often as well, they put in mood support as well. So I guess we could briefly look at some nootropics that are commonly in them. And nootropics are things that literally meant mind bending or forward mind, depending how you interpret the initial Greek from what that term came from, right? So what they do is they basically enhance neurotransmitter production. So these are signaling molecules in our brain that can cause stimulation. They can cause increased focus, increased mental arousal, increased positive mood, all these sorts of areas. And I suppose nootropics are really, really great for assisting during a dieting phase when your mood is crappy, you're feeling cranky, you're having a rubbish time. They can help you keep motivated, help you keep focused, help you keep positive. Some of the common ones you'll see are your tyrosines, which we mentioned back in the sort of thyroid section. It's a precursor to dopamine. You've also got alpha GPC in there, which is a really great acetylcholine precursor, and that's responsible for focus. So if you get particularly foggy-headed during your dieting phase, alpha GPC is great at keeping you really dialed in. Particularly if you've got a bit of a, I suppose, cognitively laborsome job, it's something you need to be awake for, a fair bit of, I suppose, admin and paperwork to do throughout the day, or where you have to be mentally switched on, but you want to, still diet. Alpha GPC is really, really good for that as well. So is choline. Choline's a good sort of supplement as well. You'll see in there regularly. But those are some sort of common ones you'll see. And I guess the final category is, because we've got the mood, thermogenics, metabolic rate stimulants, and appetite support. And then the final part would just be the energy aspect, which I guess we sort of didn't really cover in the thermogenic space, because I guess people see caffeine and fat burners and they sort of don't always understand the thought process there. It's twofold. One is the stimulating of that central nervous system to boot the adrenaline, boot the cortisol, boot the norepinephrine, increase that caloric expenditure by virtue of stimulating us to run faster. If we're doing exercise as well, increase calorie burn from exercise. But the other part of that as well is just physical energy. When we're dieting, energy is lower because we're burning more calories than we're consuming. That's the shitty part of dieting. We can't really get around that. It is what it is. So caffeine content is also there. So in terms of energy supplements, you'll see with energy involved can be your caffeine anhydrous, can be natural caffeines too. Again, yerba mate is a tea. It has a small amount of natural caffeine. You can go guaranas, you can go cola nuts. There's heaps and heaps of different natural caffeines. Green coffee bean, green tea extract. All these have got some very common ones. And look, I suppose these things can be quite I suppose useful ergogenic aids when we are doing dieting. Energy is low. It can be hard to maintain that motivation and get through your day. So they are by all means very, very useful. My only disclaimer would be mindful of how much stimulant you are consuming, particularly if you're also having coffee and tea throughout the day in addition, or energy drinks too, or a pre-workout later in the day. These things are quite caffeinated in a lot of cases. It's not uncommon for fat burners to be 200, 250 milligrams of caffeine, which compared to other pre-workouts seems low, but in general, that's still 2 to 3 shots of espresso. So you're still having a double shot or a triple shot coffee when you're consuming fat burners in this sort of caffeine content. So you're still also going to be very mindful of that, because I suppose caffeine, whilst it's great at stimulating that central nervous system, can also overstimulate you, lead to higher cortisol. And cortisol, being our body's stress hormone, can also directly blunt our fat loss efforts as well. It's a double-edged sword. A little bit is good, gives us energy, gets us going, gets us burning more calories. Too much is bad. Too much will increase cortisol too much, get our body stressed out. And a body under stress is one that does basically, it wants to build, hold on to body fat, hold on to fluid, and it burns muscles. Well, it's quite catabolic being in a high stress state. So I would say going on minimum effective dose with your fat burner, guys. When you're selecting your fat burner, go for the minimal amount of the smallest amount of caffeine you can to get your energy you need to go throughout the day while dieting. Give you a bit of a kick if you are training with it, but you don't want something that's going to be crazy, right? These high stimulant thermogenics are not your best friend. They feel great at the time, but they just really dig a hole. When you're in a calorie deficit by virtue, your body's under stress because it's burning more than you're consuming anyway. When you tack on top of that the fact that you've also got, I suppose, then high stimulant consumption on top, then it can become quite troublesome. If you're having a fat burner, in the morning, you have a coffee throughout the day, and you're having a pre-workout in the afternoon, like you can easily be consuming the equivalent of 6, 8, 10 coffees. Now, people don't look at that because they're going, I'm just having a pre-workout in the morning and fat burner in the afternoon. Well, each one of those individually can have 2 to 4 coffees worth of caffeine. So just be very mindful when you're reading these supplements. Look at the caffeine content. Be very mindful of what your total daily caffeine looks like, and try and just keep that in a sensible range to make sure it's not having the opposite effect of what we want with the fat burner. So, look, we're probably going to do a part 2 on this episode when Stu's back in, because we always love having a co-host on. We always love being able to bounce off each other, and he has a really good perspective as well, being in retail for so many years and talking to customers every day about fat loss. So I think it's really valuable that we can get him back on, get that episode as a part 2. But for now, anyway, guys, look, thanks for listening thus far. We're gonna have this up on the YouTube channel, up on Spotify, up on iTunes, all the areas you normally consume your content. Hope you guys get some value from this. And I'm sorry they're not as regular as we'd like. Both Stu and I are busy people. We both run businesses, and this is a non-commercial project. We don't take on any sponsors. We don't have any funding for this project. It's purely just us doing it because we want to put out education into the supplement industry, let you guys know what it's like to run a supplement company, what it's like to run a business in the health and fitness space. And look, we've had thousands of listeners so far, and it's been really, really positively received, and we love keeping that going. So sorry they're not always as regular, these episodes, but I do love getting on here and doing them when we can. And hopefully this thing gleans some value for you as well, and hopefully you get some attention, some value out of this one. And look, I'm going to bring Stu on to do some of the classic ones like your acetyl-L-carnitines and different forms of carnitines. I think we've got a bit of a decent grasp on some of those areas as things that help to mobilize stored fat and burn it as fuel. We've got your GBBs as well. So I purposely left a few ingredients off the table so that when Stu comes on for part 2, we can run through it. But for the short term, this is the broader picture of how fat burners work, the different categories to look at, how they can directly influence your results as a fat burner, and what also to avoid in your fat burner. So hopefully this had some value, guys. Again, thanks for listening, and look forward to jumping on for a part 2 very soon.